Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the Fleer Ultra sets for baseball for 1991, 92, and 93. Now, 1991 was a significant year this was the year that basically everybody realized that they had to take Upper Deck seriously. There was no way of getting around the fact that premium cards were going to be a critical part of the industry moving forward. Upper Deck had been around since 1989, and in 1990 you had Leaf, you had Action Packed in football, and you had Skybox in basketball that were all showing that premium it really was an undeniable truth. And so in 1991, Fleer decided to launch a set called Ultra as their first premium set. Now, Ultra their approach to doing it wasn't the same as going head to head with Upper Deck, because Upper Deck was making a very particular kind of card stock that was slightly ahead of kind of the industry norm. ProSet had started using a very thin card stock, very similar to what Score was using, and this card stock had a certain amount of strength to it, and the quality of the cards that you could manufacture held up really well. So Fleer decided to use the ProSet type of card stock as opposed to going with a higher level of card stock for their cards. And it wasn't just that. They actually kind of used the ProSet design straight across the table. In terms of the card front, there are a lot of similarities between the ProSet, mainly the ProSet Super Bowl cards, and what Ultra would ultimately create. But this was where they went. They decided to use the model that ProSet was using, which is a strange move to make for making a premium card, because the whole point of a premium card is it's a very high level card. It's a valuable card. It's one where you're selling at basically twice the rate of your normal cards. And while the ProSet cards were an improvement over Fleer, ProSet itself was not marketed as a high-end set. It was marketed as a very basic level set. So it was a weird move for them to make, but that's where they went. The cards are basically a half bleed, so you have a thin border on the top, a border on the bottom. They used a simple silver border, and then a logo kind of floating in space. This was the card model that they went with, and on the card back is actually kind of cool to an extent, because it's basically taking some of the inserts that Fleer was making and used that for the card back. So there was a certain amount of dynamism that the card back had that really did read pretty well. In that way, these cards were somewhat successful. It was like a set of inserts when you look on the back, but the card front, it was really lacking because, one, they didn't understand how to design the card in the way that ProSet knew. So ProSet knew how to make a really strong card. Fleer didn't understand that, so their card was pretty anemic. But on top of that, ProSet understood you have to use great images. Fleer didn't know this at the time. Fleer was still very much a basic card company, and they were thinking that way, and Ultra came out exactly that way. The set was a decent sized set. It's basically a 400 card set. And in it, they had two subsets. One was their prospects, which is kind of a thing that Fleer did. So they had some young stars in it. And then they also had a subset called performers. And this has veterans. And the card backs for these, they have a good write-up on it. But otherwise, there isn't really much to go on with these. And the performers subset, in football, they would actually use that as an insert set. In this case, they just kept it in the set. But they did do one really cool, very innovative thing with the set. They decided for their checklist that instead of just having checklists, which is basically what everybody did, even Upper Deck was still doing just checklists at this time, they decided to make it a little bit more collectible. So for the checklist, they used an image from the front of one of the player's cards for the front and the back of each checklist. It's basically ghosted in behind the checklist. And as a result, the checklists actually are collectible, which is a really neat advantage that they had to this set. So the players that they used were Keith Miller, Von Hayes, Terry Kennedy, and Nolan Ryan. And then they also made an update set. And the update set had its own checklist, and they used Kirk Gibson for this checklist. Kirk Gibson's card was in the update set, so it was the same one. It was basically just like with the regular ones, it was one of the cards in the set that also came as a checklist. But that type of collectability was a really, really unique thing that Ultra did that kind of they were able to use that going down the road to help to make their set even more impressive. Otherwise, there really wasn't much to talk about with the set. The biggest thing about the set was their insert set, where they did one insert set, and these were Fleer Ultra Team cards. This has a really good gold to white fade on the front. It's not a chrome finish, but it has almost a chrome-like quality to it, so it has a very rich quality that reads well. And then on the back, they have a lot of gold on the back. So these cards look fantastic, and that is the big strength. And they also were still doing their stickers. This was basically the end of Fleer using stickers in sets. In this case, they had one sticker on each of the cards, and they came as a square. So these are normal card width, and then not as tall because it's a square format. And then the logo is right in the middle, and then it has a silver foil around the outside. So that's the way that the stickers came here in this 1991 Ultra set. Other than that, that was it. They were making some decent progress. They had all the pieces, they just didn't know how to make a great card. They were going to have to figure that out moving forward. They were going to have to grow up in a hurry, and they certainly would. But for this year, they just made a base set, interesting idea with the checklist. They made one insert, and the grand hurrah, the Fleer stickers actually were kind of cool. So in 1992, they needed to upgrade in a hurry, and the first thing they did was they chose a really good cardstock. They also went with a high gloss finish. There was no gloss on the 1991 set, which is another one of the reasons why it really feels kind of weird. It feels really cheap. When you first saw it, it looked like it was supposed to be innovative, and then you just got bored with it in a hurry. So for the market, we didn't really carry with the 91 set. 92, on the other hand, they started off with the card stock really, really good. They also made a dramatic improvement in terms of how the card was designed. Here, instead of doing half bleed, they did 3/4 bleed, which means that down at the bottom they have, it's kind of like a grass marble kind of approach, but they have this little band down at the bottom with a diagonal above it with some gold foil on just above the band, and then you get into the image. And then they have two floating boxes for the name and for the team. And then up at the top, they have a whole new logo, a kind of a dynamic logo. So all of those elements were really good, especially with the glossy sheen of the front of the card. But the big thing was they were starting to choose really good images. I wouldn't say that across the whole set all the images are good, but for the most part, they were doing a really good job choosing photos. So where in 1991 the player just disappears into the background, here the player tends to stand out. So every time you look at the card, you know exactly who you're looking at. It's very front and center. So the whole card actually looked fantastic. And I don't mean just fantastic in a basic level. I mean, suddenly they were the standard bearers. They were the definition of great cards. Upper Deck didn't look this good. Upper Deck definitely didn't look this good. This was the card set that basically your jaw hit the floor. You all of a sudden realized, oh boy, okay, cards, these can be awesome. Pinnacle had been pretty impressive the previous year in football, but this was just a whole nother level. This was a whole nother discussion. Unfortunately, in football, when they would do the same set, their images wouldn't quite come out as well. They were kind of fuzzy. It was a bit of a disappointment in terms of this, but for baseball, at least for baseball, they got it right. And the card would actually improve in the next year, but it didn't really need to. It was almost like they were showing off in 1993. The card backs they're really interesting. Here they did a horizontal card back, and they have some really bright colors, which is a really good move that they made. It means that the whole card back just, it jumps out, and it's flashy, it's a lot of fun. You don't even really care about the information on the back, you don't care so much about the images on the back. The whole card back itself is just kind of its own little party. So the card front looks phenomenal, it's exquisite. Card back is a blast. And then in this set, they didn't do any subsets. They did a 2-series set, so they actually broke it up into 2 series. But they didn't do any subsets, but they did do the checklist again. And the checklists here, they're basically 3 in each side. So instead of doing 4 or 5 checklists in the previous year, here they have 6 checklists, again, all with images from the different players' cards. Starts off with Sandy Alomar Jr., and then they also have Ray Sanchez, Nolan Ryan again. They have Scott Sanderson, Junior Ortiz, and they have Mike Morgan. So those were the checklists that they did in this set. And the fact that they had a Nolan Ryan card again was a really good move. The Nolan Ryan cards were a fun treat in both series, and they're very highly collectible. So they add not just some interest, but actually some value to the checklist. So this was a great tradition that they were doing. They also had a bunch of inserts. They weren't quite up to the level that they would get in the mid-90s where it was just crazy. They were still building up. but the inserts were getting a lot more impressive. So the first insert set is their all-rookie team, and this is designed very much like the main cards in the set. But here they have a solid black marble base, and then they have an interesting logo above it. So it's the way that the whole card front looks is just, it's a fantastic look. But the card back is even more impressive, and I remember at the time looking at these card backs with the deep, rich marble on it, all the detailing, the weight of it. They would do chamfers for the edge of the marble transitioning from the frame into the image. You would look at this, and I mean, even if it was like in a display case and you wanted to buy it, you just stare at it. It was incredible to look at and go, I didn't know cards could look like this. I didn't even think that a card could look like this. It was truly, I wouldn't say a game changer, but it was a whole nother plateau. And it told everybody, including Upper Deck, okay, you guys are all going to have to step up your game. This was an incredible thing that Fleer was able to pull off here in 1992 with this Ultra set. This set really is one of the great benchmark sets of all time. And with their All-Star cards, they increase it to an even higher level. Here the card front has a solid border around the whole outside, and the marble reads a lot more clearly. There's a very distinct quality of the border to the image. It looks great. Card back's not quite as impressive, but that's perfectly fine because the card front is incredible. And then they had an award winner set, and it was also kind of a take on the main cards. Here they had blue marble down at the bottom, very strong, bold images on the front. The whole way that the card front looked was really good. The card back, it's more playful in the card back, but otherwise these cards still were pretty much the standard bearers for the entire industry. This still was heads above what anybody else was doing. And then they also had a commemorative set, or what we would later note as career highlights. This was a set of 10 cards of Tony Gwynn, and these cards have a green border around the outside. It's a lot like the All-Star card on the front, and 10 cards of Tony Gwynn. And they also did a wrapper redemption where they would provide 2 more cards. And here, the way that they numbered the cards on the back is kind of interesting. This is about the only time they would do it in this particular way, but otherwise, it was a 10 card set with a send away for 2 more cards, and all of the 10 cards also come in an autographed form. They would come right out of packs in the autographed form, so you can actually collect all 10 of the autographs, although that's pretty tough to do. They were very rare. So that was what they did for 1992. 92 was a really impressive year because they made a jump that you didn't think Fleer could make, but they certainly made it. And for 1993, they had the ability to impressively make the cards better. The cards continued with basically the exact same design. They shrank down the border down at the bottom. They changed it over to kind of a peach color, and it wasn't really a problem, primarily because they were shrinking it down, but by changing over to that color, it's almost like a pitcher's mound or the space underneath the base. It's basically the dirt in baseball. It was actually a good idea that they came up with. They also dramatically improved the logo. So the logo was really, really dynamic with the kind of the fire-like element up on the top. So these cards were really, across the board, they were looking a lot more impressive. But the images, that's what was really impressive here. The images, whether it was just the selection or also altering the background to make the players pop out a little bit more. But throughout this set, man, these images were fantastic. Now on the card back, it's not quite as good. All of the 93 Ultra card backs suffered a little bit because they actually got more into putting stuff back there as opposed to just having bold colors. It still looks good, it's just not quite at the same level as the previous year. This is a better designed card back, it's just not as much fun to look at, and it isn't as clear of a statement. And then again, they didn't have any subsets. They did have the checklist, and the first checklist was Ryan Langford. Then they had Bobby Witt and Mike Piazza, which is actually a pretty good one. That was kind of the replacement for Nolan Ryan. And then they had Ray Sanchez, Jeremy Hernandez, and Junior Ortiz. So those were the checklist that they included in the set. Again, it was a 2-series set, so they had 3 and 3. But that was the set, and again, like I said, this set itself was really, really impressive on the front. But Fleer was already starting to get into doing lots of inserts. This was kind of the first year that they weren't flooding you with inserts, but they had a lot of different options in here. It starts off with the all-rookie team, and here this is a very bold card, starting with My word, that is one big, bold Ultra logo on the front. They also have a bunch of bold text around it with bold colors on a black background. It's a very upfront card. It's a flashy card. It's not a great card, but it is a nice card. It's a kind of it's starting to show that Fleer was getting carried away with these inserts, but even when they were getting carried away with it, they tended to be able to make things that were really impressive. Card back looks a little bit better because it's not the big mess of things going on, but that was the all rookie team. They also had an Ultra All-Star set, and here you have a cutout of a player against basically the same image that's done almost like, I don't know if it's supposed to be like buried in rock or how it works. It's an interesting effect. It's kind of weird and distracting, but it is an interesting effect, and I'm not sure how to feel about this card, but it is fun to see kind of how they're playing around. On the card back, it's a little bit harder because it's tough to read the text with all the stuff that's going on with that image. But that's basically the way they did that. Then they have their award winner set, and this is an interesting set because it's basically broken into 2 or 3 sections depending on how you look at it. In terms of the design, there are 2 halves to the set, or 2 parts. There's the top glove portion, and this is 18 cards that are all horizontal in the format, and it has a full black marble behind the player. Very, very impressive cards. And then the last portion is more of a true award winner set. This is for all the other award winner categories. And so you have like MVP, and these are vertically oriented, and it has more just about text in the background. So you have NL and AL top glove winners as the first 2 sections, which is the first theme, and then you have a whole different card design for the second half of the set, which is just the tail end. But it is all one set, so it's a little bit distracting. But I need to make sure that you understand that is actually the way that the card set is supposed to work. These are all together in the same set. Then they have, for career highlights, they have Dennis Eckersley. Now, Dennis Eckersley was going through an interesting time where he became a Cy Young winner as a reliever. So he'd already been a starting pitcher, he'd been successful, and now he had a whole new life as a really, really impressive reliever. And so they did a whole set dedicated to him, but unlike the Tony Gwynn cards that were just straightforward cards, here they have cutout shots of him. Well, not cutout shots, but they have shots of him where the whole background behind him is done in purple. And then they have a little band down at the bottom. And so that's the way that all these cards come across. And again, they have the cards in the pack, and then there's another send away. And they also did these with the autographs as well. That's for all these career highlights, that's how they did it. And the way you can tell the official out of the pack autographs is Fleer has a seal embossed into the card. So if you're not sure, if you want to know if this is actually an out of the pack autograph, you can look for that seal. Once you see it, you know that is the valid version that they released in the packs. Then you have Ultra Performers, and this is a set that was a send-away, both with wrappers, and then they also did something in magazines. When you received it, you actually got one of those little plastic snap cases that you buy in a card shop. That's how it came, a little 10 card set in a little snap case, but they actually printed onto the case in silver Ultra and Ultra Performers. So it's an interesting case in the fact that it's actually, it was created specifically for this. So it's a cool thing to have. I mean, for me, I have no use for these cases, but just having one of these is really neat. And they also had a cover card, which was printed on one side, blank on the back. It's not a collectible, but it did come on the top of the set as well. And then they have 2 sets at the end for hitters and for pitchers. So they have home run kings and they have strikeout kings. And these 2 sets look very, very similar. They basically do the same thing. It's like a space theme in the back with a big baseball planet in one way or the other. And so the home run kings are their own rare cards, and the strikeout kings are their own rare cards. That's basically kind of how it all finished. But they didn't do too many insert sets. They did just enough, so it was a lot of fun. They would get carried away real soon. So Ultra went from not very good to incredible really fast. And they were basically leading the industry in terms of card design and in terms of inserts. I mean, this was about as high as Fleer could get. What would happen in 1994? Well, I'm going to look at that in another video. And so definitely tune in for that. But this was the rise of Ultra and reaching really the pinnacle of what Fleer was at all capable of doing. And it's a fun rise to watch. It's a fun thing to see. It's fun to check out these sets if you haven't had a chance. So definitely do so if you've never had the chance to really explore them. But other than that, I don't really have much more to say, so I hope that you learned something in this video. Definitely check out other videos that I've done, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.